All right. So I want to talk about practical merchant adoption. And I call this talk practical merchant adoption a global approach because merchant adoption tends to be kind of different in different places. You know, if you travel around the world, the way that merchants adopt Bitcoin is a bit different. And it can kind of differ based on the different economies, the different complexities within those countries, the different legal frameworks, the different regulations. So practical merchant adoption tends to be a kind of flexible thing. The very first ever time Bitcoin was used in commerce that we know of, who knows, the entire history, a lot of stuff happens without seeing. But the first one we know of was when a guy named Laszlo bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. He posted online, hey, I've got a bunch of this Bitcoin, and I want to start using it. Let's use Bitcoin as money. That's what it's supposed to be. So let's do it. I've got 10,000 Bitcoin. I'm bought 2 pizzas to my house. So somebody did. They ordered him 2 $100 pizzas, and he sent them 10,000 Bitcoin, and the first commerce was done. 10,000 Bitcoin is worth quite a lot now, but so lots of people talk about it and say, I'm worried, about spending Bitcoin. I'm worried about using Bitcoin in commerce because the value of it's going to go up. And now I don't have the Bitcoin that I used to have because I spent it on things. But that's actually the wrong way of looking at it. Did Laszlo really give up 10,000 Bitcoin? Actually, he did. But what he really gave up was the value of 10,000 Bitcoin, which at the time was about the value of 2 pizzas. He could have easily offered somebody else $40 to, said, I'll give you $40 if you give me 10,000 Bitcoin, and somebody else would have done it, because that's what it was worth at the time. So the opportunity cost of spending Bitcoin isn't really a big deal. The opportunity cost of spending Bitcoin is the exact same as the opportunity cost of spending fiat that you could have exchanged for Bitcoin but didn't. So there was really no big problem with adopting Bitcoin for merchants, or no big problem with the idea of spending Bitcoin. So the picture here, it's a bit hard to see on this, but that was my daughter about, I think when she was 10 or 11, using Bitcoin to buy some bread rolls at a bakery down. Bitcoin has been used by merchants since around 2013 was when it really started kicking off. In 2011 we had people like WikiLeaks and WordPress and Reddit accepted Bitcoin back in 2011. It was around 2013, 2014 that merchants really started kicking off and accepting Bitcoin for daily commerce. So things like buying bread rolls and what. So adopt Bitcoin. So as a merchant, what does it mean? There's a bunch of different ways you can imagine adopting Bitcoin. You can imagine that around practical merchant adoption. One of the first things that kind of springs up in everyone's mind is the idea of the financial regulations, things like taxes. How do I deal with taxes when I accept Bitcoin in return for goods and services? If I'm a business, chances are I can't just kind of pretend it doesn't happen. Maybe a small business could probably sort of sell a few things under the table for Bitcoin and nobody's really going to notice. But when you get to the bigger companies, they're not going to do that. It's just not a practical thing that merchants can do. Is just sell a few things under the table for Bitcoin. They really need to deal with the entire regulatory side of things, and that gets really complicated by the fact that it's different in every single country. So the regulatory frameworks tend to be different. Is Bitcoin treated as money, or is Bitcoin treated as an asset? When you exchange Bitcoin you get Bitcoin in return for goods and services, is there some kind of capital gains tax associated with it when you then convert it back into a fiat currency, if you ever do so? How long? In Germany, for example, it's 2 years for a private individual, but unlimited for a business. That after it, capital gains tax no longer applies. Some countries don't have capital gains tax at all. Some countries they do, but it doesn't apply to Bitcoin. So there's all these kind of annoying questions that you have to deal with. So that's one of the worries that merchants have. Another one, of course, is the technical thing. Do I hold it? Do I sell it? And then what are the implications around that? Another concern they have is the problem with cost. So if I want to accept Bitcoin, it's going to probably cost me something. I'm going to have to set up some kind of infrastructure. Maybe there's some tooling. Quite a few of the people you see accepting Bitcoin, I noticed downstairs, they've got those nice little card terminal devices. Those things aren't free. You can borrow them. But, if I'm going to accept Bitcoin in my store, do I have to buy one of those? Is it worth it for me to buy one of those? Do I sell enough things for Bitcoin to justify having one of those devices? Or do I just run some software on my phone? But if I just run some software on my phone, there's all the security concerns. If I'm running a wallet on my phone and then I give it to one of my employees, can they steal my money? How do I know if they stole my money or not? So there's all of these other kind of security questions. The biggest problem, though, for merchant adoption is most merchants really don't care about accepting Bitcoin. Most merchants just say, why should I accept Bitcoin? I don't care. I personally like orange pilling merchants. It's a thing that I do. I love going into stores and saying, do you accept Bitcoin? And they say no. And I say, okay, bye. And I walk out. Then I come back maybe a couple of days later. Hey, do you accept Bitcoin? No? Okay, bye. A few days after that, I go back to them and say, do you accept Bitcoin? They say, I'm that guy who's been in here a couple of times already. Like, well, yeah, and if you don't accept Bitcoin, I'm not buying anything from you. I'm sure a few other people won't as well. And maybe after a while, they get sick of it and they start accepting Bitcoin. But that approach doesn't stay. Sure, I can convince people after a while they should accept Bitcoin. I can explain to them why they should accept Bitcoin. I think everyone in this room knows we want to hold Bitcoin. We expect the merchants should want to hold Bitcoin as well for the same reasons that we do. It's good money. It's better money. But if they don't know that, why should they care? So that leads to a lot of problems with trying to increase merchant adoption. Going in an orange billing merchant on a personal basis doesn't scale. It's not a scalable approach. You're not going to orange bill the entire world that way. You're certainly not going to get the big companies like Amazon and Tesla Motors and they're sort of on and off again as far as the coincidence goes. You're not going to get those kinds of companies by just walking in. So I've spent the last couple of years doing nothing but focusing on merchant adoption. That's basically been my life for the last couple of years. Figuring out what are the barriers, how do we get around those barriers, how do we fix it. And I'm happy to say I'm the CTO of a company called Musket, who are doing exactly that. So this presentation is largely about Musket, but I promise you it's not an ad for Musket. I really want to actually explain what we're doing and why, because I would like to see more competition. I want to see people doing the same things that we're doing, because I think that's just good for all of us. The more Bitcoin gets adopted, the better it is for everyone. So Musket is a company which does Bitcoin adoption, and we do it by offering a single interface for purchasing goods and services. We are a payment processor. We create online portals, we create card machines, we have a single integrated back-end full EPOS system, and all of that is your bog standard, very accepted payment industry standard stack. That includes Visa acceptance, MasterCard acceptance, American Express acceptance, and Bitcoin acceptance in one system. So, how many, I'm going to actually just ask you, how many of you have walked into a store and you know they accept Bitcoin and you say, yeah, I'd like to pay with Bitcoin. And for some reason, you can't. They say something like, yeah, the machine's not working, or the boss has that on his phone and I don't know how to use it, or any of those other kinds of things. That is never an excuse when there's a single device that's on the front screen and pay with Bitcoin and pay with card right there. So by putting Bitcoin as a first position right beside the fiat payments on the same system, the same front end, the same back end, it removes all of those barriers. It removes all of those questions. Do I have to have a separate thing? Do I have to handle all of my accounting differently? No, it's all one system, so they can handle it as one system. Very little training required for the merchants, of course, because it's the card machine they use every single day. Again, this is not clicking. Sorry, can you do that with the clicker? There we go. So a lot of people try to solve that problem by building separate systems. So you've got your fiat acceptance on one side, you've got your Bitcoin acceptance on the other, but really that doesn't scale well. So it works. You can walk into a place and say, I'd like to go with Bitcoin, and they'll have two machines. They'll have their Bitcoin acceptance device and their card acceptance device, and it'll work. But a couple of weeks later, that Bitcoin acceptance device is under the counter with its batteries running out because not enough people are walking in and asking to pay with Bitcoin. So the only realistic way to solve the problem is to remove the barrier between the two. There we go. And simply bring it all into one system. So I'll just get this forward. Most of us here know Bitcoin pretty well, but how many of us actually know the payments industry? Who here understands the complexities of the payments industry? Who has dealt with card payments? Yeah, okay, well, like 1.5 maybe. Yeah, it's incredibly complex. In fact, this is a simplified diagram of what happens when you swipe or tap your card on a normal card machine. So I'm not going to read through all of it, you can see for yourself, but there's a whole bunch of middlemen involved. There are all these checks and balances, all of these things happening to make sure that the payment works. Bitcoin is so much simpler than this. But this is the status quo. This is what we have to work against. So we decided that this must go. Sorry, it's not click again. We decided that at Musket, we would simplify all of that by replacing all of that back-end stuff with Bitcoin. We are not just a Bitcoin front end, so we allow acceptance of Bitcoin on payment terminals and the web interface and so on. We're replacing the entire back-end infrastructure, the entire payments world with Bitcoin flows. So when you pay with your card, there will be Bitcoin moving around in the back end instead. What merchants end up accepting is entirely up to them. But we will have a system whereby everything is Bitcoin on the back end, greatly simplifying all of that complexity. That also means that we can enable a whole bunch of additional things. This is what we have now, and it's going to grow. So we have compliance technology, we have point of sale, we have reporting, we have operational stuff, so digital signage, staff hours, like all of these sorts of things are built into our EPOS. But all of this is a front end around what is actually a series of Bitcoin flows on the back end. We take this giant chain called BESS of the current payment system and we replace it with Bitcoin without anyone seeing that. So, of course, you can walk into the store and you can pay with Bitcoin or you can pay with card. But on the back end, we simplify everything. It also means we make everything way cheaper for the merchants. So we can actually offer card payments at a very competitive rate compared to most of our competition. And it's only going to get cheaper the more we integrate Bitcoin into our back end. That is Bitcoin kind of a chosen horse approach because merchants want better payments. That's what most merchants want. They don't actually come to us and say, we want to be able to pay with Bitcoin. They come to us and say, we want our payments to be better, faster, cheaper. Especially cheaper. That's kind of a big thing for most merchants. They pay a fortune a lot of the time to their card providers. So they want better, faster, cheaper payments. They want nice, clean APIs to be able to interact with, especially with big companies. You know, they don't want to use the web interface to see a bunch of reports. They want to pull it down their API. They want it to be clean and easy to use and integrate into their existing systems. And very, very few companies do that, and even fewer do it well. I'd say Stripe is pretty famous for having done that in the online space, but almost nobody's done it in the card present space. So, you know, walk up and pay with card in person. So we can do that, and we do it well. And at the same time, we try to force Bitcoin into all of these merchants. We are Bitcoiners through and through. So it's not just the case that we are a payments company who's using Bitcoin to make a better payments company. We are Bitcoiners and we want Bitcoin adoption to expand. That's our goal, that's our mission. We intend for Bitcoin to be the fundamental currency backing every payment everywhere in the world. And we're on the path to do that. So that's us. Right now we are live in the UK and Europe. We intend to be global. We need to be strategic with what countries we move to next. But you know, if anyone in any particular country says, I really, really need this in my country, please do reach out to us. Hello at ABCT26 is our standard email address, or you can just come and talk to me. I'm a CTO, I'm a tech guy, I'm not a business guy, but absolutely, come and talk to me or reach out to that email address because if there is a strong enough business need for us in a particular market, then that could make us move to that market sooner than we'd otherwise be planning to. So, like I said, Europe and the UK right now, global domination next.
Thank you, Tim. I just want to add to you, we also have a very complicated payment network of the TradeFi payment systems and so on. It's very true. If you look at just a quick anecdote, if you look at your typical major retail retailers out there, the shortest jump that goes from user tapping card to money in the merchant bank is 4 different systems. The typical jump is 10 plus. So it's only got 14. That's how many different companies take a little bit of rate, 0.0 something like 0.00% along the way. And that's what sometimes it takes a while for payments to go through, and that's when the refunding is sometimes changes. So there's lots of downstream things that come down to in that technology and Bitcoin simplifies a lot of that. So I think Basket is doing some really cool things, and I'm sure there's lots of merchants who would love to do that. My question is, it's Bitcoin and self-custody focused. So if you take the Bitcoin and you've got the backend set up for that, so that's part of the software.
Yes. So merchants who want to self-custody, merchants who don't self-custody, we can provide options for that. For merchants who want to self-custody, our default setup actually gives them a node in the cloud. So they hold their keys, they have complete control over their own Bitcoin, but we manage things like Lightning liquidity for them so they don't have to deal with that. For existing Bitcoiners who can deal with all of that themselves, we also offer Lost Wallet Connect, so you can basically hook up to your own backend, and we're not going to charge you any fees that way either because it's entirely your backend.
Amazing. Thank you. Another round of applause for you.
Is Satoshi here?
We're also Satoshi. We're also Satoshi. But I'm looking specifically for Satoshi.
So I just have a question.
Yeah.
So what are the card fees?
Okay, like I said, I'm CTO, not CEO or CFO or anything like that. So actually, I can't tell you directly what the card fees are because I don't know. I can tell you they're competitive and they will vary by region, by location. We get charged different fees from our downstream card, depending on things like location. Type of card matters a lot as well. So, you have an international business Visa, you're probably getting hit with, in the region of 3 to 4% from Visa before we add anything on top. But if you're using a local domestic debit MasterCard, personal one, it's well under 1%. So, it does vary and there's not much we can do about what the card providers charge us, but we kind of we reduce and simplify what goes on top of that.
Anyone else got a question? Yeah.
That shows that everything's on back into Bitcoin. So when we swipe a Visa MasterCard, what happens?
Right. So, I was kind of careful with my word there. It will be Bitcoin. That's what we're working on. Right now, when you swipe a card, it's basically the normal card flows happening on the back end. But where we are starting to make some inroads is what happens when something like an international card is swiped. We can make a payment in the country where it was actually registered rather than being an international card, and then use Bitcoin rails to move money internationally and then settle the other end cleanly. That's kind of what we're in the process of building, and step by step we will replace the entire card infrastructure, and basically we intend to kill Visa, MasterCard, Amex. We want them to die.
Anyone else got a question?
To say that infrastructure piece is really important right now. That's where the conversation needs to go around Bitcoin. It's the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see what your strategy or vision around that is, if not detail. But yeah, it's really important.
So actually, we're in the process of doing a big website rebuild. Our website is really minimal right now because it was basically during our early startup stage, and we're in the process of now sort of expanding that. And so within the next couple of months, there should be a lot more detail on the website about broader term vision, where we're aiming, what we're planning on doing. Obviously, there's going to be some trade secrets there as far as how we're doing it on the infrastructure side, but it is very much our intention. Visa, Bitcoin, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and so on will be replaced by Bitcoin entirely.
People don't understand about Bitcoin. It's protocols, technology, infrastructure. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, exactly. The entire protocol infrastructure is what enables us to do that. Not enough people are paying attention to that. I agree.
Was there another question?
Yeah, so a typical free daily business with running your point of sale. In practical terms, how would they transition over to that?
Yep. So for a typical sales type environment, you've got a point of sale device and so on. You are probably currently locked into a contract with one of the bigger providers. That would be set to expire in a few months' time, typically 3-6 months to normal. You would sign up with Musket, and at the point, about a couple of weeks before your old one's due to expire, you get a new card terminal sent to you. We'll activate it, we'll test it, we'll make sure it works, and then at the cut-off date, you simply stop using the old one, start using the new one. It just works. So your card payments will continue on the new terminal, and your Bitcoin payments will come through and happily sit on your node or whatever other back end you've decided to join it up to.
Have they started to notice? Have you guys?
I don't think they've started to notice yet, or they haven't understood, and that's one of the big things. So your question of infrastructure there was one of the important ones, because I think a lot of their competition see us as, it's another card machine and they added Bitcoin to it, which would be cool on its own, but we are so much more than that.
Really South Africa on the list of rules?
Like I said, I'm not the business guy, but if enough people in South Africa tell us there is the business to be done here, then absolutely South Africa will be my own.
Thank you for this.
How many business do you need to sign up?
There's not so much number of businesses, it's more about guaranteed total payments going through the system. So we talk about the total amount of money that goes through rather than whatever. Again, I'm not the business guy, but I think if you came to us and told us, I got a guaranteed 100 to 200 million USD of a year of business flowing through this country, which I can definitely sign up to Musket, then there's a very good chance that we're seriously going to have a conversation.
The number you can't really sign up people and see the numbers.
Exactly, yeah, and we need to set up all of the local like the regulatory things, like I mentioned, are a pain. Just going into a new country, like we recently got our first merchant in Spain. Like I said, we're live into the EU and UK. But just going into Spain, we had to set up a bunch of fiscalization things for Spain. The Spanish tax office needs this automated reporting, which comes from the card terminal to the tax office. And if you don't have that, you can't sell a card terminal in Spain. So we had to set up for the Spanish system.
What did you set up in Spain?
No, we didn't need to set up a company for Spain, thankfully, but we did need to create the infrastructure for our card terminals to be able to talk to the Spanish tax office. So those are the kinds of things, and every country's different. Some countries we won't need to do that. That'll be easier to go into those countries. But yeah, case by case basis.
What's the price for it?
So at the moment, we are only selling the terminals, but there's a good chance we'll probably have a couple of options, either selling or renting on a monthly basis, because those are the two things that traditional card providers do. We haven't had much interest in the rental thing yet, so we've basically been selling them at cost. So we get them for £100 and something, maybe close to £200, and we sell it basically at cost. But we're not trying to make money selling card terminals. We are making money basically on the infrastructure side of things. Yep.
In that example of Spain, when the transaction happens in Bitcoin, what are they wanting to see in terms of the tax reporting? The denominated sale.
Yeah, Spain wants to see everything in its fiat equivalent. Basically, they don't treat. Spain doesn't consider Bitcoin to be money; they consider it to be an asset which has a particular fiat value. So that's what the tax department wants to see.
Any more questions? Oh, we have the man here. Mr. Meaning, is there a way for any sort of small merchants to step in one by one at a time?
Definitely yes, but we have to be in the country first. So that's kind of the thing we need to be. So right now, any merchant in the UK or anywhere in Europe could just come to us and say, hey, I'd like to sign up with Muscat, and that's going to be a relatively painless process. Let's say if we wanted to a single merchant in South Africa, the answer right now would have to be no, we're not ready for South Africa. And if we had 1,000 merchants or whatever, just a few really big merchants even come to us and say, hey, we'd like to, then maybe that can speed things up. And after that, any small merchant could just come along as well, yeah.
Okay, so once you're in the market, anyone else can just tap in.
Yeah.
Right now, those markets, just to recap, what are those markets that you are in?
EU and UK.
EU and UK. Anywhere inside EU and UK.
For the moment.
We round of applause for being able to thank you very much for being